Welcome back to Rupture, the world of Besgesistan. I'm Wendy Lurrie. Invisible disability creates a specific type of rupture. Nothing about the way you look has changed, but everything about the way you function has. And because nothing is visible, the burden isn't just the condition itself. It's the constant requirement to prove it exists, to justify accommodations, to explain limitations, and to perform credibility for systems that only trust what they can see. This episode comes to you from the Ministry of Visible Proof in Besgesistan, a place where looking fine means you don't need help, not looking fine means you're unreliable, and either way, you're penalized. Today's conversation with Fallon Morey explores what it's like to live with invisible disability and what happens when that collides with systems that only trust what they can see, which created so much pressure for Fallon that she needed to not only rethink how she worked, but her career itself. Hi, I would like you to meet today's guest, Fallon, the way I met Fallon. At some point last year, I put out a call for new officials of Besgesistan, and you might wonder why. Well, Besgesistan was growing, and it still is. The ministries were sprawling, and they still are. And what do new bureaucracies need? They need new bureaucrats. And I found a message on that post that said this: I feel I'd be a shoo-in for leading the ministry of overthinking and second guessing. Or would I? I've been mulling on this for hours and circling around whether this is the best choice for me or for someone else while weighing the substantial pros and cons. I'll go make a list and you can let me know what you think. Be back after I find the longest sheet of paper I can and draw as many checkboxes as possible. And I knew in an instant that Fallon belonged in Besgesistan and that the only ministry that she needed to run is the one she invented herself. So Fallon is the Minister of Overthinking and Second Guessing, and I'd like to welcome you today. Welcome, Fallon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very happy to have you here on Rupture.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Let's just dive right in, okay? And people will learn about you more about you through the conversation, so I'm going to leave the intro right there. So let's start with the rupture and naming the rupture. Tell us what happened. And I know yours came in waves, so.
Yeah, so I kind of had two ruptures in my life. I think one of them was more external, was more obvious to the rest of the world around me, more significant impact on my public life, I'd say. And the second one was a little more internal. So I'll start with the first one. I was an officer in the military on active duty, and I'll just leave it at a significant personal tragedy is the best way to phrase it. And for reasons we'll unpack later, I was able to overcome it and get back to work, to life. I've always been, pushing extra hard all the time just to make myself feel like I could just keep up, or not even keep up, but just try to be on par with everyone else around me. And so I jumped right back into work and I was doing it and I was moving it forward, and all those other basketball analogies they have for what you do at work to keep things advancing. And something really simple led to this sort of, a rupture is a great word for it, but it was literally a conversation over a brunch one day just cracked me in half. And by the end of the morning, I was literally laying on the outside porch of my foreign apartment in the rain, just shattering into pieces. And, I had a lot of kind people around me. Luckily, I was overseas. I had no family support. I had no real close friends. So I had someone take me in and she said, honey, I've experienced this. I've been dealing with depression my whole life, and that's what this feels like. That's what this sounds like. So I went to, get psychological evaluation. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but psychological evaluation, which is not an easy feat in the military because A, you don't have time, and B, there's kind of a stigma against getting mental health help. And they quickly diagnosed me with not only having major depressive disorder, but being, in the middle of a depressive episode. And also, they diagnosed me with having generalized anxiety disorder because of what I was telling them about my life. And, my therapist was like, not everyone lives with this like constant running script in their head of like, did I do this right? Is this about to fall apart? Is the world going to catastrophically end? This will all go away at any minute. And I was like, really? I thought everyone lived like this. I've been living like this forever. And so, as a result, I sunk into this sort of like depressive episode. I couldn't, I'm trying to find the right words. I couldn't find my way out. I wasn't in danger of like self-harming. I just didn't care. I had this tremendous apathy. I didn't care about certainly my own personal well-being. I couldn't care about anything in the world around me. It was like hanging out over my own shoulder and piloting my, meat puppet around the world, but I wasn't really experiencing it. It eventually led to me getting sent back home from overseas, canceling sort of the job I was supposed to do in the Navy for the next 3 years and having to get transferred to another command. Effectively in my line of work, that would have railroaded my whole career. I would have never really advanced to where someone in my position might have. So I was looking at, a career I wasn't going to be super happy with. I could have continued, but it didn't seem like it was in the cards. I had to kind of explain to a lot of people around me, like why I was supposed to be here for 3 years and now I wasn't going to be. And, eventually I crawled my way out of those depths and kind of reset my life, this new life that I wasn't expecting to be living. And was able to move on from it while learning how to deal with my, my anxiety on the long term. And then, keeping a constant vigil for never falling into that pit again of depression. So that was the first one.
And so let's just stick with the first one for a second. So that one came on suddenly, right? You did not have warning of that. You didn't sense that wasn't like a gradual onset.
No, it didn't feel like a gradual onset. But when I look back now, hindsight is, I would say it's even greater than 2020. Hindsight is like, why couldn't I have seen that coming for years? Before I moved overseas, I had been in a relationship with someone that was very emotionally and mentally abusive. Like it met all the check boxes. I had just gotten out of that. And so like that probably was putting me on that, on that path or adding to that burden. I went through this like very personal, like horrible, like the most horrible thing that's ever happened to me personally. And I just gave myself a month and then sort of had to regroup and pack it all back in and just go. So now when I look back, I think, oh, I should have known it was coming. I should have known by the way I was feeling that it was coming. Like this was the most miserable for many reasons that I'd ever been in my life. I couldn't find anything that really made me happy or contented. But the actual like moment of rupture was like a bang. Like I was doing fine. Look at me. I can overcome anything with sheer willpower. And
Yeah, we're warriors, yes.
Right. And one person's comment sent me into a spiral of emotional chaos that I've never felt before. And it all just kind of cracked from there.
So it felt sudden, but it probably wasn't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm not a great gauge of my own emotions. I don't always feel a strong emotion or an emotion building for reasons I'll explain in a second. So for me, like sometimes emotions do that to me anyway. I don't feel the buildup. I'm fine and then I'm very sad, or I'm fine and then I'm very angry, but it's hard to feel the buildup to anything. So that probably added to that.
Right. Okay, so why don't you keep going, and that'll explain why the
Yeah.
emotional
So
piece is so hard.
yeah, absolutely. So, and we'll kind of, I'll probably end up talking about this more, but I was fortunate enough to find an amazing partner, my husband, who, when I had my first rupture, I was just meeting him, and I had to say something which I don't think a lot of people have to say, which is, look, you make me feel very joyful when we're together, but you can't make me happy. And I'm in something really horrible right now, and it's a little what other people would call crazy, and we just started this. So if you want to run away, like, I
I
fully
get it,
support
right?
you. Now is the time, man. Like, off board as fast as possible. And he's like, yeah, so like, what's the big deal? Like, he was just very like, I'll deal. It's fine. I don't even have to deal. It's you do you, like, but he was very supportive. He was good at intuiting my needs as I learned about my own anxiety. He sort of already could like intuit what I needed in the moment I needed it, or sometimes before I knew I needed it. So we built this great life together, and we had two awesome little boys. And, when my second son was about 4, he was diagnosed as autistic, and quickly after that, ADHD. And I always thought, like, man, I am killing at this mom thing. Like, I always know what he needs so intuitively because I'm a great mom. And then I sort of realized I always know what he needs because I always needed the same things. And it made me sort of step back and be like, hold on, what if I take my life and I reflect it through this lens of the potential of being autistic, and that's why the world feels so hard and so difficult and so not built for my brain. And I look into this. So I listen to a lot of podcasts. Honestly, there are great podcasts out there by autistic adults who discovered they were autistic later in life. And I was diagnosed with ADHD, which I knew had always been a problem, but I was like sort of re-diagnosed and got medicated. That helped. But I went through this long kind of very not complicated, this very like intensive diagnostic process. I found a great doctor. She's actually based in Canada, and she herself is autistic. So it's somebody who has autism that is helping other autistic adults. And I was diagnosed as autistic last year in December, not this past year, but the year before.
So anxiety, depression, ADHD, autism. That is a very full plate.
That is a full plate. And the second rupture was more internal
Talk
because
about that.
yeah, because so it's not like you know autistics and even people with ADHD, any type of neurodivergence, and I'm sure that and anybody who has any kind of issue with processing can probably tell you, as you probably are aware, not to speak for you, but you do a lot of things to make the world palatable to you and you palatable to the rest of the world. A lot of people call that masking. I call it that, or for me, the stuff coming in goes through like a big, tightly woven mesh filter. And I had been putting so many of these things in place for so many years, I didn't realize that I even had them and that things bothered me. And I just was used to letting everything bother me. I was used to letting it bother me to the point where I felt physically bad and learn how to even overcome that. So I think my body absorbed a lot of the stress of that over the years. My brain certainly did. So once you take those masks off, you can't put some of them back on. So like it's like when you pack a suitcase for a trip and everything fits in nicely because you've just washed it and folded it.
And
And
you
then
Tetris
you
it.
take it out and wear it, and it doesn't go back in the same suitcase. It's like that. Like there's a lot that doesn't go back in this suitcase anymore. So like internally, despite having to still work and be a mom and a wife and a friend and a person in the world, you are having to like reconstruct the way you deal with the world around you and kind of grapple with the fact that you're never going to be able to just put up with stuff again. And that's like an internal rupture that sort of reframes everything about everything. In some ways it was very positive. I was able to let this long-standing thing. I was able to let little girl Fallon off the hook and tell her, like, it's not your fault. You weren't weird. You weren't bad. You didn't do it wrong. You just didn't have the brain that was built to do it the right way. And that was incredibly freeing. It was also incredibly terrifying and scary. It was like waking up in a world that was made of different colors.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, one of the ways we describe it with, because I totally get it, because also my brain does not work the way it did before. I've
yes,
had to relearn because my brain processes, and I talk about this a lot, not just at different speeds, but it processes in different ways. Like
yes,
it's not going through the same pathways, but yet you have to kind of show the world that you're fine and you're not fine.
yeah.
You're not fine. And I mean, that's the invisible quality of this, of all of these things that both of us have and a lot of our guests have had, makes it so, so difficult, which is actually like the next thing I want to talk about, which is the cost of being fine. Like it does not come without a price to go through your life and be a mom and do your job and be a friend and be all these other things when you've got all of these things roiling inside you. And like, what does it take to seem fine? I mean, there's energy, there's resources there. I mean, you're using everything you have. Like, what does that take?
I mean, on the depression and anxiety side, what I've found is that it's been about 10 years since I was diagnosed, and the cost of that obviously was very high at first, trying to make it through, not only the rest of my Navy career, but when I decided to leave the Navy and go to a civilian career, a regular career, kind of, navigating those waters, that because that was new. It had nothing to do with my anxiety, but now I had to think about like interviews and grown-up insurance and like all these things that as I call it, that I'd never thought about before,
Never
all
needed
while
to.
dealing with being worried about all of it all the time. Um, and and that was a high cost, but I would say it was temporary because it's easier to explain to people around you. It's easy to get medicated for anxiety. I'm on medication. I'm a full proponent of it. It makes life easier. Even the ADHD, like once I got through like saying like it's okay to tackle this later in life, that was because once, I don't know if many people know, but as you approach like perimenopause and menopause, the hormones and the structures in your brain that allow you to mask and to get by when you have things like ADHD break a little bit, and it gets harder and harder and harder to kind of white knuckle your way through your life without intervention. So I was medicated for that. But the autistic side was, I think, the hardest because the cost of being fine is that until you're diagnosed, and I would say watching my little boy go through it, his cost of being fine every day, it's heartbreaking because it takes a lot out of, like, I can see a like micro version of it in my own house. And like it helps me honestly to go, you know what, like, to be a better parent to a child who's autistic, but to be easier for me to be fine as an autistic person. But it's an incredible mental, physical, emotional toll. I don't know if I'm allowed to reference this, but there's a great adult male podcaster, and he did an episode about masking, and he said something that I always remind myself of. And he said, when you tell other people you're autistic, people like to be like, and that you have to like put on a different persona at work. They're like, well, I have to put on we all put on a different persona at work. And he said, no, for you, it's like getting dressed for work and putting on a scarf. For me, it's like getting dressed for work and then putting on an extra outfit on top of your outfit. And can you imagine having to wear two outfits around all day? And that's a perfect example.
That's a great analogy, actually. That is a great
Going out into the world around people that are not like your safe people is
right.
like wearing an extra person suit, like, and having to zip that up and suffocate all day,
Well,
basically.
it's like it's a double-edged sword, though, right? Because if you show people what you're really going through, then you're basically saying to them, like, you know all this, and they're all going to try to fix it. I mean, everyone tries to fix it. We actually have a ministry of "Don't fix me, just listen,"
Yes.
because people don't want to be fixed in the moment that they are bearing their souls. But on the other side, to keep it all inside so that you can function, you can pass, and in your language, you can mask, is a tremendous amount of work. It's exhausting.
Yes. And people, especially with a disability that you cannot see, as you probably have experienced as well, people either want to like, I don't know if you assume positive intent and think they're trying to either make themselves less uncomfortable when you talk about it, or ask for what you need, or they're trying to make you feel more comfortable by showing some sort of misguided empathy, say things like, well, we're all a little anxious, or we're all OCD, or we're all a little autistic. And you would never walk up to somebody in a wheelchair and say, well, we're all a little paraplegic sometimes, because somebody's physical disability is visible. It's a struggle, and you are aware visibly of the accommodations that they have to live life. But with an invisible one, you can't, unless you want to go into deep detail, which autistic people will tell you one of their favorite topics to like deep dive into is autism. it's when you're first diagnosed, all you do is talk about being autistic and learning about how to be, fix being autistic, I guess, not fix it, but like accommodate yourself, and see if people are feeling the way you're feeling. But people like want to like squash that down and
Yeah,
be like,
they do.
you don't really, or they get like threatened, especially I found as a professional woman, like, how can you be doing as good or better than me with this thing that you deal with? So I also need to relate and say, well, I have a thing that I deal with.
Right.
Or
Right.
like, it's not really a big deal.
Well, I do tend to give people the benefit of the doubt, because I go through this also, and assume that they're well-intentioned.
Yes.
But that they also don't know, and this isn't their fault. And this may be something that we do a panel discussion to kind of workshop, are what can people say when they hear these things that are actually, that remain well-intentioned, but aren't as damaging as the things people actually say. I mean, I heard a lot of, hey, it could have been worse, right? I mean, count your blessings, you could have been dead. I mean, all kinds of stuff that people say that is meant well, but comes across as though they're minimizing what you're going through. And then that puts you in the position of, what are you doing? Arguing for your disability? Like that's not a position any of us wants to be in.
Exactly. And, you kind of liken it. I think there's a tiny bit of a grieving process that accompanies any type of diagnosis or rupture process. For the rupture itself, I love this word that you've kind of put on it, because I've never heard it described like that, and it's such a perfect encapsulation of what actually happens.
And I said it before Mark Carney did at Davos. He used rupture, so I was like, no, we were there first.
You are the pioneer. But yeah, like you go through this grief process, and it's like when people are well-intentioned with a grieving person and they say things like, well, the person could have suffered longer, or the person is in a better place. And it's like, yeah, sure, I'm sure on an emotional, spiritual level that may be true if that's what you believe, but the person grieving doesn't want to hear that it was a positive when they want to like feel the feeling of it hurting them, which is okay to do. And it's okay to sit with your disability and say, I need something more to get through the world, or I need you to hear me and listen to me in a different way. I think the other big cost is, if you are an independent person, if you're used to functioning on your own and being strong, and you now have to stop and go through this incredibly humbling process of figuring out who you can talk to safely and telling people that you need help.
How hard was that? I mean, I know for me how hard that was. How hard was that?
It's very hard for me. I'm so lucky with my husband at home, because we watched some videos online, and somebody was joking about, this is the big light. Don't turn this on if you have neurodivergent people in the house. And I was like, I said something about that. And my husband just looked at me and he was like, I've been doing this for you since we started dating, which is about 9 years before I got diagnosed with anything. And I said, really? He said, yeah, because I turn it on and hiss at me like a vampire bat and close your eyes. And so I was like, I guess that's off limits, or I figured out the right volume of the TV to set for you, because you would like curl up when it was too loud, or I'd turn the lights off at a certain time. So
You found a good
like,
one.
I know there are people in the world that are there for you that will just know and intuit what you need if you're lucky, which not everyone is lucky to have that, but I was lucky to have that in my inner circle. It was harder for me in the workspace, and it was harder for me with friends when I didn't know how people would react.
You know what? Let's go here next. I have another section I want to come back to, but since you brought it up, one of the things we talk about in Rupture and Best Guess Stand a lot is that after the rupture, what the rupture reveals are the system's failures, right? The rupture doesn't just happen to you. It shows you that the things you thought you would be able to count on just aren't there. So which systems failed you first or hardest? Workplace, medical, family, social?
I mean, with
Your adventure.
the first one all the above. With the first one I experienced, I think the workplace one was first. I realized I had always known that the Navy was like a very, you show up to work, their job for Navy medical is to get you back to mission ready and back to work. I had given years of my life barely ever taking time out for sicknesses. And, my first therapists with the Navy who diagnosed me with depression and anxiety were great. But shortly after that medical system started to fail. I mean, I literally had a psychologist that I saw make a suicide joke to me at an appointment. Excuse me, trigger warning. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I know, but they made a suicide joke?
Correct. Walking in, they basically made a joke to the effect of like, because we had to miss an appointment, and the person made a joke of like, well, it's okay. It's not like I think you're gonna, and then he like made a very like casual reference to self-harm. And I was a little blown away, and I was like, so I asked to switch therapists, and then they were like, well, it'll be months until you can get a new one. So that system sort of gradually failed me, like over and over again until I got out. And it wasn't honestly until, luckily I was out of most of my depression at that time, but my anxiety was still kicking. And so luckily when I had my first child, my very nice doctor, like the day I gave birth, was like, you're taking this medicine and you're going to see a therapist, or I'm gonna, like, while I was pregnant, she was like, your anxiety is worse for the baby than anything physically happening with you. If you don't go see a therapist within our practice and get that calmed down, I'm going to make you take medicine. And that was kind of an eye opener. So like, but the initial medical systems failed me. The Navy sort of workplace failed me. I had one, senior officer who walked into my appointment with a medical professional to ask if I was like, after my personal tragedy, well, is she dying or can she get back to work? And so I think
that's a binary, right?
So in the beginning, I think the systems on the other side, on the autism ADHD side, I think the systems that fail you first are when you learn the people around you that just can't like openly listen to you, or just aren't willing to like accept that you are not what they thought of you. But I would say that for anyone who's dealing with an invisible disability, especially if you're autistic and undiagnosed as an adult, I think those systems have been failing you for a long time, personally, because none of the systems are built for you.
Correct. They're
and
not.
So you are making your own system. So yeah, it's socially, I think, in the second case.
But that's a lot. I mean, that's in workplace, medical, and social. Those are like massive systems to expose failure to you. And I totally agree, because one of the points that I make a lot, because I'm seeing it more clearly, especially as I'm removed from the workplace more and more, is, and I see it in medical stuff too. I had an experience yesterday that was like this, but systems are not built for the people who need them. They are built for the people who administer them. And that's the problem. But that's what's revealed through the rupture. You don't know that until you need them.
Right. And my most recent work has been in healthcare on the administrative side. I was a marketing and communications director for a healthcare plan. administering to a certain population. And so one of the things I loved about that job was thinking through the eyes of the people using the system, because we would publish everything they were going to see. And the idea was like, everything is confusing. And through the lens of everything being confusing about healthcare, like, how can we make this better for the person receiving it, not for the person writing it or the person administering it, which was like, I feel like gave me a lot of empathy for that job, because things are set up for a world of people with a certain brain that meets the, I don't know, the bottom of the bell curve, and not
Right, or sits within the band. There's like a band.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a lot of systems failure. All right, I'm going to go back to the one before, and then we're going to go to something else. So this one is about translation. And how often do you find yourself explaining, like, what's going on? Like, whether it's to managers or doctors or colleagues or friends, or like, or back at the time when this was new?
I mean, for my first one, I had to do a lot of explaining, because I had to tell, I was lucky. The second in command of the ship I was on a ship at the time. He was an incredible human being, still one of the most amazing people I've worked with. His wife was like basically a second mom to me. I had to talk to him, and that I didn't have to do a lot of translation for him, but because he was a very personable, like, he understood people and that people have stuff. But everything else in my life had to be explained to people. I still have to explain anxiety, for example, because people get offended about why you're asking for things because they think it's a reflection on them. So if somebody watches my kids and I explain, like, please don't let my kids do XYZ, I have to explain to them I have anxiety. And they'll say, like, oh, no, I know everyone's anxious about their kids. And I was like, you don't understand. My brain creates scenarios that are so real that I can remember them like they happened. So, like, the first time I took my kids to the water park, we went to the water park, we had a great time, we came home, and that night, trying to fall asleep, my brain decided that one of my kids had drowned at the water park that day, and made up an entire scenario that this really happened, to the point where I, like, had to go to my kids' rooms and I touched their chest and I listened to their breathing, because my brain had decided that something bad happened, because something bad could someday happen, and was like trying to, like, prep me for it, I guess. So when I try to explain to people, like, no, it's not just casual worry. It's a whole processing problem. That takes a lot to try to explain to people, and that at the end you have to worry that they think less of you, or they think you're crazy, or that's a lot of translating. In my current work, I'm lucky. I found this incredible boss. I told her what was going on. I told her I was diagnosed with autism, or I was getting diagnosed as autistic, and one of the first things I realized was, like, God, the overhead lights in this office, I can hear the buzzing all day. It feels like someone's got a needle inside my ear and is, like, poking me all day. Like, it physically hurts me. And I couldn't turn the lights off in my office. And she was like, so the next day she came in, she's like, I'm taking your office, you're taking my office. I can turn the lights on in here. Sometimes you end up with a person that will just listen, that you don't need to translate, or who looks at you and goes, she's having a rough time. Hey, I need you to, you should get out of the room, go walk. Or I know that you, like, I've translated you enough to know that you need this. But for everyone else, you have to kind of weigh out whether the translation is worth it. Like, do you give this little piece of yourself and this little insight away to translate why you have acted a certain way? Or do you not do that? And that's where the masking comes back in, because as soon as you decide not to just act the way you need to act for yourself, and you, like, put the filter back on to be more palatable to them, like, you again go back into this, like, that harmful cycle. So the translation question is interesting, because you're always balancing, like, whether you should even do it.
And how about the limitations of language? Did you find that you had the language to explain this?
No.
talk about that, because that's one of the things that we focus on is
Say
the
that's a very
limitations.
visceral reaction.
Yeah, no, perfect.
I don't know how to explain it because my brain works the way it always has. But now I realize that, as especially with the autism diagnosis, it's people don't believe you when you say, like, well, you were fine with this yesterday and now you're not fine with it. It's like, no, it's that I finally took the Band-Aid off that part of my brain and realized how, like, wounded it still is, and that I still feel like bad there. I mean, there's not even, like, I use a lot of analogies in my life because for me that helps process, and it helps me explain to people, like, how I'm feeling. So for example, if I try to explain, like, when you realize you suddenly can't stand a certain texture, you like, people don't understand that. Well, you ate yogurt yesterday, why can't you eat yogurt today? And I was like, I can never eat yogurt again because my brain finally, like, associated the fact that yogurt is gloopy and gross, and like, I will never enjoy it, and I'll never pretend to enjoy it again because I pretended to enjoy it for 20 years. But I have to say something like, it's sort of like that, I don't know, like recency bias or confirmation bias. When you buy a red car and then you see red cars everywhere,
Yes,
like,
yes.
your brain rewires a little bit to look for the red car. It's like that. Like, my brain is now, like, refused to go, you know what? I'm not going to force myself to do the thing that I hate anymore.
I totally get that because I now have a long list of things that I can no longer tolerate. Like sitting at my desk to work, I can only work at a dining room table. That's all my brain will accept. There are thousands of those. And my brain just, certain things cause what the neurologists cause brain irritability, and they make you feel awful, and they're nonsense things. But you kind of have to honor them because you have to respect what your brain needs. And what it needs now is different from what it needed before.
And can I ask you a question?
Of
How
course.
long has it been that you've been sort of, like,
So my TBI is about 3.5 years old. The first, it was interesting. I was just talking, we did an episode about this, and it's sort of been in stages, right? So, like, the first year was just, oh my God, what has happened? And I was wearing dark glasses and basically saying what the fuck to everything, couldn't handle light, couldn't handle sound, couldn't handle anything, and trying every kind of treatment known to man. I mean, literally, like, every kind of treatment known to man. And then by year 2, I realized that those treatments weren't working. And I was kind of stuck. And I was just in this, and you will understand, this is sad, dark place. This really sad, dark place. And in year 3, when I happened upon Best Guessistan, because I needed to create a place for people like us, because the world as it is wasn't accommodating. So I invented one. But that demonstrated to me what the world was lacking and also what the world needed. And the more I started to write that and create these ministries and create this infrastructure, it was like, okay, I can create this fake world that provides all of this, but what can we learn from this fake world that we can then apply to the real world? Because there are a lot of us, right? I mean, rupture comes in a million flavors, but once you're ruptured, we're all kind of in the same place of trying to figure out, who are we now?
Like, the Grand Canyon is never going to fuse back together.
Correct.
And your brain, I think my brain is the same way. Like after my anxiety diagnosis, putting a name on it, like, it didn't make me more anxious about everything. I just started to notice how anxious I was about everything all the time. And now it's something I live with, and I've worked very, very hard to manage through therapy, through medicine, through all kinds of different methods to accommodate myself, and ways to deal with when my anxiety gets acute. Still in probably the middle 2 years of the autistic thing, because I'm still finding things that my body is, or my brain is, like a hard no, or that really, really trigger me. One of the things I realized about a year ago that is incredible, and I know people use the word trigger very, like, casually, but it is like
It's
a hair
real.
trigger.
It's real.
One of the things that I realized is I do terrible, and you might notice I probably over explain, because I have a major trigger on people not understanding my meaning or my intention. And so when I proceed with something based on what, doing something, whether it's at work or personal life, I'm trying to convey a certain message or convey a certain thing, and then people misunderstand me, it makes me not irrationally upset, just incredibly upset. And then I can't help but think, like, if I were just normal, I could explain why I'm upset. But like, I can't, and I lose the words for that, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't have a way to explain it. I just explained this to someone at work the other day because we had like a little bit of conflict, and I said, I really struggle with people not understanding me and my intention. I am very forthright. So I will always tell you what my intention is. And I'm not a good liar. My kids are not good liars. They're terrible. They were playing like a game called Liars Uno the other day and both losing miserably because especially my autistic son is a terrible liar.
Great parenting, though.
I don't have like I don't have a good work versus home persona because I don't have a way to like to turn that stuff off. I am just one person, and it's hard enough to be that one person. So like, yes.
So, that's really interesting. So the one system you didn't mention that failed, which actually a lot of our guests who've experienced different kinds of ruptures have said was the first one that happened, was identity. How did all of this mess with your identity?
So I don't know, because identity to me is a fascinating concept because it's hard for me to grasp really what it means, I guess, which is interesting because when I had my autistic diagnostic test, she said, "Who are you?" And I was like, I can't answer that question. I need more information. I need do you mean like, what do I do for a living? Do you mean like, what is my social job? Do you mean like my name, age, birthday, eye color? Like, what do you mean? And she was like, I don't even want the answer. Like, that's the autistic answer that I was looking for to check that box, because neurotypical people will answer that question like social role first, followed by faith usually, or occupation, followed by some other category. Like, I'm a mom who's a Christian and I work at a school. But autistic people are like, I don't know. I don't know how to process that.
So interesting.
I think
it's a diagnostic question.
Yeah, it's a diagnostic question. And I still struggle to answer this because for the identity piece, I might be the only one that says for the identity piece, as I was diagnosed as autistic, it was the piece that like made me breathe a sigh of relief about my entire life in a way that I had never been able to before. I think I mentioned I had spent my whole life being called weird and being on the outside and feeling like every situation I walk into has a script that I haven't seen and rules that I have not been given the book to. And I'm always on the outside of it. I'm always like just a little off. I'm always saying the right thing until I'm not saying the right thing. I'm always like going one step too far. I don't know how to like stand or sit or talk, or like I don't know how to play the right game. And so for the first time, I could go, you know what? There's a reason I can't do any of this. And that was the only system that shored up for me in that case.
So diagnosis was relief.
A little bit, because it didn't mean autistic became my whole identity. I'm still the person I was, but I was able to go, you know what? I can finally stop feeling bad about my identity and feeling bad, because before my identity was like, if you want to break it down to roles, I am a mom and I love being a mom as that part of my identity. And I love working. Like I like being busy, and that fulfills me. It's something I enjoy doing when I'm doing it toward a good cause. And I enjoy all those things still, but like the identity that's behind that is like, I'm just some like socially awkward, a little off base, weird girl. Like, guess what? Like, there's a reason for that. And I feel so much better that I didn't just do it wrong for 40 years. So
that is such an interesting way to look at it. That's really, really insightful. And it's true.
Yeah. And and especially revealing your diagnosis to certain people, is something that I think can make or break your identity as well. Because when you start feeling good about your identity and then you tell another person and they disregard what you say, it can really break that process for a lot of people. You know, I was really nervous about telling my mom because she was a teacher and she was a special ed professional. And one day earlier this year, I was in the car with her going somewhere and I just blurted it out. And she's like, I know. And I was like, what do you mean you know? She's like, well, I kind of thought about it when you were a kid because you always had your hands over your ears. The noise bothered you, the light bothered you. She's like, I didn't touch you a lot and hug you because when I would, you would like shrink away because I don't like to be touched. That's like one of my biggest things, especially not by skin. I actually have a shirt I wear to social events to give me the language, and it's a smiley cactus that says "not a hugger." My husband bought it for me.
I may want the link to buy that.
I might just send you my extra because I have two.
If you have an extra, I'll take it.
But I told, and she said, when you were younger, there was no test for girls. There was no behavioral differences for girls. It was all based on little boys, and it continues to be based on samples of mostly male children. Now, research is getting better and is evolving, but that's a huge gap in autistic and neurodivergent research, is that it is only around a certain demographic of people and a certain gender and sex. And so it is not, she was like, it wasn't made for you at the time. And I said, well, you realize it as I was older? And she was like, yeah, but how do you tell your like high functioning, successful, very intelligent daughter that potentially you're going to tell her you think there's something wrong with her
brain, yeah,
especially if she hasn't considered it herself. And I was like, and I had only been thinking like, like, why didn't anybody do this for me? And I realized like she's been carrying around this thought for a long time that she's never been able to share because she just doesn't know how I would react, which was a new perspective for me altogether. And so I think that, I was lucky that I found people that could shore up that continuing sense of like identity that I was able to grab because I was lucky enough to find that, which I acknowledge not so many people, especially who are autistic or ADHD or depressed or anxious, nobody believes them and their own family doesn't respond and their friends don't respond. And that wrecks that particular system.
And that's a lot. Part of what makes invisible disability so difficult, right? I mean, if you walk in with crutches, everybody gets it, right? I have these conversations with people all the time, but when you have these other things and you put in all the work to seem fine, because society needs you to seem fine, right? Society doesn't have a lot of room for people out like us who are outside the band. Again, why we need Best Guessistan. You're faking it all the time. Right. Right? You're performing, you're wearing an extra, to use yours, a new set of clothes on top of your existing set of clothes.
Yeah.
Just to get through it. And then it's like, I'm done. It's exhausting.
It's exhausting. I was away. I was out of town all week, for example, for work. And I was in my like extra thick person suit for a couple of days because there was a lot of like emotion and I was in an office building and I was under lights and there was a lot of noise. I was in a busy city. I just recently moved to the country, which is so much better environment for me and my son and my family. And I didn't realize how much I needed that until we got here and all of the things. And so like today I'm rolling in probably not as fresh as I could be to this because I'm exhausted because I had to put my extra person suit in the wash and it's just me. And I'm like still grappling a little bit with like going through all this stuff, but people who do not experience it don't understand that like what toll that takes.
Yeah. Agree. And I think, by the way, I love the extra thick person suit. And we have a gift shop in Best Guessistan. It's called No Wrong Answers. And it may be something we need to sell there. for when people leave Best Guessistan and go back to the real world, which we also refer to as Worst Guessistan.
I agree. I think the world is Worst Guessistan.
Yeah, the world is. That hasn't been revealed because that's at the end of the other book, but I'm just sharing that for now.
Yes,
okay, I have two more questions, I love it. One of which I know the answer to, but the first I don't. So this is the magic whiteboard part of the conversation. So especially when I talk to someone who's gone through a rupture and has really experienced systems failures, and you have experienced multiple, failures on multiple fronts, If you had the magic whiteboard and you had no restrictions, no barriers, you could fix any one of these or more of these with one or two ideas. What would you do?
I mean, I think let's start with the easy one. Medically, I would just make medical care. I would stop separating out mental health care completely from medical care because one so desperately impacts the other. And I would make it so much easier to, like, for people to get to both for the care they need. I would make adult diagnosis like a more regular practice. It was so hard to find a diagnostician for anything as an adult, and I would make diagnosis so much easier on adults. And I would make more avenues for easier support. That, like, it shouldn't be that people who have money for therapy or, access to internet only or access to a large social group of like-minded people, like, should not be the only people that get to thrive.
You mean healthcare should be a right and not a privilege?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely healthcare, but mental health care, especially because all of us have a brain piloting the meat suit, as many of my friends say, like, and, like, everybody has a brain and it's a complicated little organ that can
Yeah.
fracture in a number of different ways and needs to be cared for as much as your heart, as much as your orthopedic
Yep.
pieces,
All of it. Probably
all of it.
even more so. Probably even more so.
And I think socially, like, wouldn't it be great if we had I don't even know. I started dating my husband before apps got really, like, dating apps got, but wouldn't it be great if we could just have, like, for me, if I could just have, like, an autistic friend matcher that I could swipe right and be like, oh yeah, this is my kind of, like, neurodivergent that I can be friends with, or, oh, a normie that, like, knows how to talk to neurodivergent people, like, excellent. I
That's
found that, like, you tend to gravitate toward people that understand you, and once you get diagnosed with things, it turns out you find people that, like, in your life who are like, oh yeah, me too. And you didn't realize that until you were, but
right.
there's a reason. But
It's the
socially, I
red
would
card. It's the red cars you were talking about before, right? It's the you notice the red car once you bought the red car.
exactly.
It's exactly that.
And then I'm like, oh, you sure do have a lot of weird flavor issues. Like, what's your deal? Or, like, why do you always wear linen? Just like,
I do. I do. I haven't found my TBI people. That one turns out to be actually harder to find, but
really.
I've developed more neurodivergence since. Like, it's definitely blown up my OCD in big ways, my anxiety. It just blew all that up. Those things are easy, especially in New York. It's not hard to find someone who has anxiety because
I've always thought, man, it would be fun to live in New York. And then if I spend a week in there, I'm like, get me out of here.
absolutely, absolutely. We're moving to the country too, by the way. That's like
Yeah,
our next
where's
move.
this parachute, this knapsack? Like, get me out,
Yeah, I
like,
love it. I'm a native New Yorker, but my brain needs the quiet now. So we're moving up to like very, very quiet northern Vermont, where there are just a lot of these stresses don't exist, and the noises. I mean, for me, the noises are a huge part of it, and
the
the lights,
noise, the noise.
the
It's the
noise.
noise of life that is probably one of the biggest things I noticed with both ruptures is everything around you makes noise. And especially after realizing that with my autistic diagnosis, um, like every light that's turned on makes a noise. Every computer that's on has a fan. Every fan has a click. Every person near your house makes a sound, and, like, everyone around, everything has a noise. And the constant background of life, like, I wish, like, that might be another whiteboard. I wish I could get, like, permanent ear filters installed
Mm,
that tamp down, because I don't know if you remember, like, the old car radios that had the squelch button and you could turn
yes,
down, like, as much of the background as possible so you didn't get the static. It's like when you realize how your brain finally works, someone removed that option and you can no longer filter out at a threshold. And so, like, I would find a way. I know it's impossible, but if you
no,
could
not
somehow
with the
find a
magic
way,
whiteboard.
like,
Everything is possible. Everything is possible.
I want headphones that filter out all of that, but leave the people at the right volume. Like,
Perfect. Perfect. I think that's absolutely perfect for the whiteboard. That's great. Now we just need to find engineers to do it, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah. But like also I have terrible demand avoidance. So like I'm not going to be the one to go find the engineers for you.
I'm good at organizing things. I might try because
Yeah, and
like
I'm
I said,
a
I still have this
project
down
manager
thing.
in real life because once you give me the tools for the project, I'm great at like putting it all together and making it happen, but I'm not going to take the first step.
That's fine. I will. We'll talk about it offline.
Okay.
So my next question, which is usually my last question, I do have a last question, is something you already answered. Because usually at this point, I ask our guests if they would lead a specific ministry, but because you volunteered and invented your own ministry, and I think everyone who listens to this will understand why you are perfect for it. You are the minister of overthinking and second guessing, but you already have your paperwork. Like, you're already on board. I don't have to send you the confounding instructions and all of that. So
Oh no, I mean I have the sealed version in here. I wish I want, for my wall. I'll just never figure out where to hang it. That's why I have a pile of other certificates I don't know where to hang
well, you'll
because
do
I
the
have.
pros and cons, and you can do like the rubric and like rethink the rubric and then see what other data points you need.
Absolutely. Yep.
But my actual last question is, because I feel like we scratched the surface, would you come back
Yes.
and talk some more?
Yeah.
Because there are lots of things we have to talk about. I mean, more about
Yeah.
the neurodivergence. There are other things, but I would love to have you back and continue the conversation if that works for you.
Yeah, I would love it. I think I told you this offline, but and I thank you for keeping me on so long, but I by no means speak for every autistic person or an anxious person out there, real person with anxiety. And I never say that my experience means that people who are not neurodivergent don't also have things going on. But I'm so open to speaking now about what I'm going through because I want the next little girl, Fallon, to hear those words and go, you know what, it's okay that I'm like this. I'm not bad because I was born like this. It's not a failing. It's something I can help myself with, not fix, because I don't want to fix myself. I want to just be myself. But also for all the people out there that don't have the medical care access or don't have a supportive partner or a supportive system where they feel like they could get diagnosed and blow up their own life a little bit and have support, like listen to this and go, you know what, it's okay to be like this. At least somebody else is like me a little, I think it's important just to talk about.
I agree. And that feeling of you're not alone and there are other people going through this, and I now have the language to talk about it, is like, it's huge. It's
Yeah,
huge. Just because these things can feel very isolating and alienating. So thank you for sharing your story.
absolutely.
And thank you for giving us so much of your time. And I
Yes,
really love this conversation.
me too. Thank you so much for having me on. I love what you're doing with
Thank you.
with this.
And you'll be back.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Rupture, the World of Best Guessistan. Today's episode featured Fallon Morey, and we were talking about invisible disability. If this episode resonated with you, or you know someone who could benefit from it, please consider sharing it with them and helping them find our community. To support our work, you can like, share, subscribe, or join us at bestguessistan.com. Bring us your rupture. Bring us your systems failure. We would love to hear from you.